So fighting games are cool, and Marvel vs. Capcom Fighting Collection Arcade Classics is just around the corner. We just kind of had the release of Spider-Man Across the Spiderverse not too long ago. We had a leak from Insomniac about the Great Web game, which is like a sort of Spider-Verse multiplayer game. That Nicolas Cage Spider-Man Noir movie is in some sort of development. We just finished another Spider-Verse event in the comics, with I'm sure another one right around the corner. Ultimate Spider-Man has relaunched. Spider-Verse seems more prevalent than ever, and it seems like it's only going to become more mainstream with the coming years. And a few years ago, it got me thinking how cool it would be to get a Spider-Verse fighting game in the style of Marvel vs. Capcom. It just kind of seems so obvious to me, and it's not like the idea is totally out there. Capcom has made 3v3 Marvel fighting games and X-Men fighting games, and so why not the Web Warriors? And your options are absolutely endless. So this video is my pitch for why Marvel Games should hire somebody to make a Spider-Verse fighting game, even though I'm not sure that it'll happen. This is my pitch regardless. For this video, I will be using the MVC3 roster as like a template, since that is my favorite in the series. I won't really be diving into music or stages, since there are so many characters to get through, and that's really what's been like the forefront of my focus when thinking about this idea. I'm also not a fighting game dev, so I'm not going to lay out a complete blueprint for each character when it comes to like the actual gameplay mechanics. I'll just give enough details for each one, and hopefully that'll give you the idea of how they would play. So anyways, I think that is enough setup here. Let's just dive into the roster. Starting off, of course, we have our standard 616 Spidey, which would play about the same as he has for the past couple decades now. Next, we have Miles, of course, who would play similar to Pete, but with the added bonus of being able to put opponents in a stun state. I would imagine he would hit way less, and maybe he wouldn't have all that great of air combos. I don't know. Moving on, we have Gwen, or Ghost Spider. I would say she'd be similar to Miles stat-wise, with maybe better mobility and a great like air combos. And that takes care of, the now iconic trio. So from here, we really do kind of just start to go into the more Spider-Verse kind of deep cuts, I guess. Superior Spider-Man. Superior Spider-Man would play similar to Rocket Raccoon, really gadget and trap heavy, not all that good with the air combos or typical combo strings, if that makes sense. Next we have Spider-Punk. I'd imagine he'd use his guitar for most of his attacks and would be like a rushdown character. Maybe he could have a few ranged attacks that use the sound of playing the guitar as like the damage, if that makes sense. Or I don't know, maybe that would just be his ult. I would imagine he'd be pretty frail, but I think his attacks could do like a lot of like wall bounce maybe, or like some like crumple states to kind of like make him stand out. After Spider-Punk, we have Cosmic Spider. I think this is a very obvious choice. I'd have him be a mix between Cyclops, Jean, and Deadpool. He'd focus primarily on ranged attacks with the ability to teleport. He'd probably have to be like a glass cannon for balance sake. But maybe he could have like a level 5 that was sort of like Jean's, like some sort of like super state or whatever. Spider-Ham is another obvious choice, and let's be honest, he'd play like Phoenix Wright, just odd, pulling out random objects for attacks, things like that. Continuing with the typical people you think of when you think Spider-Verse, we'd have to have Noir. For him, I'm a little more unsure. I'd say he would lack the ability to web swing for sure. But maybe he would focus more on webbing like opponents and building combos that way. Which a slower ranged with like a slower ranged attack that does like decent damage via his like pistol. So something like Chris Redfield. 2099 I think would be kind of like Pete in playstyle, just slower and dealing more damage. Where he would really differentiate himself is with two different status like inflicting attacks. He could do like a grab where he inflicts poison via a bite, and some sort of like berserker barrage that inflicts bleed to reference the talons on his fingers. So yeah, and these moves would tie into his poisonous fangs and claws, like I said. He'd definitely be like a lot less mobile than a lot of the cast, I think, and I would argue for lore's sake, that could be like due to a lack of spider sense. Of course, we have to have Jessica Drew. She'd be able to float like Storm, Thor, and Phoenix. I don't know too much about her, to be honest, but I think she can shoot lasers. So I mean, but either way, I think you kind of have to have Jessica Drew. And you can't forget Mayday Parker, who would be more or less a 616 Pete Shoto. Except she would have like a few moves maybe where she calls in Gary Drew for an attack or some sort of like assist, tying back to how in her original run for a few issues there she was constantly and sort of like reluctantly teaming up with him. So I think that would be super sick and like a cool way to differentiate her. Spider India would have to be included. I'll be honest, I have no idea how he would play differently from others. I kind of think you would maybe have to do his Across the Spiderverse variant to like really separate him. But I don't know. He would have to be here. Spider UK, I suppose, would be like Thor. If I had to like assign him a pre-existing playstyle, he's a key like web warrior, so you can't not have it. Like he is crucial if you've read the comics. Like he's kind of the start of it, so you can't just like not have Spider UK. Penny Parker would play like Sentinel. That's pretty obvious. Spider-Man, I imagine, would play like Spencer, given he only has one web shooter, and it always seems to be more so used for traversal than anything else in his show. But I also think it'd be really cool to incorporate the GP7 and Leopardon as like an assist, kind of like Jill's Zombies in MVC 2. Or like how I would have Gary Drew functioning with Mayday. Or, you could make each one just an alt. I don't know, listen, when I wrote this script, I didn't even like consider that. So maybe just make them alts. They'll work, but either way, they should be included, I think. Lastly, rounding out the Spider-Verse kind of staples would be Annie Mae and Spinneret. I think Annie Mae should be her child form specifically, since that would set her apart from Mayday, and Spinneret would, I don't know, maybe play like Jill, whatever that means, I guess. I'd keep these two, though, their own separate characters, just because the game is a 3v3 format, or if it was a 3v3 format, it would only make sense. That way you could have the whole Parker family as like a single team rather than like, I don't know, Peter and Spinneret or Peter and Annie Mae, who have, you know what I mean? So, yeah. All right, so before I move on to the more obscure picks, I'm going to throw out some really easy to implement characters. These characters basically would more or less play identical to pre-existing MVC3 characters, so there's no like brainstorming of how they operate. It's just almost like a skin swap. So Spider-Hulk, Spider Supreme, Captain America Miles Morales, no elaboration needed. I would add Spider Knight to replace Taskmaster, Mongaverse Spider-Man to replace Beautiful Joe, and Spirit Spider to replace Ghost Rider. I would do Spider Herc for Hagar, Spider Thor for Thor. Now there are several versions of Spider Thor. typically we think of the time Spidey was granted like the false Thor powers by Enchantress. But since then, that's what I was getting at. That's basically just a variant of the 616 Spider-Man and not like a proper different Spider person. So I'm going to opt actually for one of the special variant cover Thors that Marvel did for the 60th anniversary of Spidey. In this scenario, you could make the other two versions of Spider-Thor as like alternate costumes to like appease everybody. But for my purposes, I would actually pick, like I said, the variant cover Spider-Thor, since he clearly like is his own guy. Next, I would make Spider-Phoenix for Phoenix. This one again is the same situation as Spider-Thor, so I opted for the female variant that they did for the 60th anniversary. Again, you can make the other two versions as like different skins or costumes. I just figured let's replace a lady with a lady rather than like, remove a lady from the roster. Spider-Punisher or just Peter Parker Punisher would replace Chris Redfield. And with all that out of the way, we are actually on to the like obscure choices that I don't really have any sort of pre-existing playstyle in mind for, or any sort of like direct replacement, or like who they would be directly replacing in this hypothetical. So Arachnite definitely got to be one. Especially since the suit appears in the newest Insomniac Spider-Man game. Kind of like perfect. Man-Spider, I think for him, maybe you could start as like 6-armed Spidey and then have like a point either due to damage or like maybe even a super that turns you into the Man-Spider form. I think that'd be really cool and interesting. Werewolf Spider-Man, Sun Spider, Web Weaver. Sun Spider and Web Weaver. Zero ideas of how they would function, but I just feel like they gotta be in there. I guess maybe Sun Spider would focus more on aerial combos and sort of like aerial attacks, but either way, they should be there. You could maybe do the Mark 1 armor as a sort of stand-in for Iron Man and as a reference to the 90s animated series version of the character where Spider-Man's like a millionaire. So, you could count that as an alternate Spider-Person. Aaron Davis as the black and gold Iron Spider, because why not? Assassin Spider-Man, he could play like Deadpool minus the teleport. Cyborg Spider-Woman from the new movie could replace Nemesis. Obviously, you need Silk. So I don't know, maybe she'd play like Viper. Again, for these ones, I really don't have like a huge grasp on how they would play. And of course, you can't forget Ben Reilly. I think the Spider-Man Beyond suit would be his default, but both the Scarlet Spider and Sensational suits could be alternate skins. Of course, you could do Chasm now that Chasm's a thing. When I originally wrote this script like years ago, Chasm wasn't a thing, but so you could just do Chasm, but I feel like more people would prefer Ben Reilly proper, so to speak, as the standard. And I think the last time we saw him was in the Beyond suit, so that's why I would make it his standard. And if you have Ben, you need Kane. So I suppose imagine Kane would be something like Wesker. I don't know. Same vibes, same energy. Arachnoman would be a really fun gag character that I would love to see. He could play like Dan Hibiki from Street Fighter, just like a bumbling fool because he has no superpowers and he's just an actor. And I have a really soft spot for Arachnoman. Spider-Man has to be included. I don't know how she would play, but like maybe something like Phoenix Wright, but like with his like objections, so she could like scold you the entire fight. but she has to be in there. Spider-Man has to be in there. And if you have Aunt May, then you need Uncle Ben's version of Spider-Man also. Again, no idea how he would play, but like if Aunt May is in there, get Uncle Ben in there. We have the whole Parker sort of family playable. And it's fun. I think Ezekiel Sims, aka Last Stand Spider-Man, is another sort of like no-brainer, but maybe a little more niche. I think any big Spider-Verse fan would be kind of annoyed to not see him. So yeah. Gotta take a breath. All right, so we're 40 in now, and I think we get into sort of like the real deep cuts. The last couple were definitely niche, but I think these are getting kind of deep. I think you have to include Aranya, Spider-Woman. I'd probably go with her classic design than her new one. I just think her new one, I don't know. I don't like her new design as much. Night Spider would be cool. She just has like such a great design, and it's Black Cat. So, you know, you appease the Black Cat fans also. Like, why wouldn't you include her? It's Felicia Hart. Like, it's, you know, Gwen's in there, MJ's in there. Get Felicia in there. You could have a whole trio. It would be, you know, it's cool. I know she's also new, but Spinstress, I think would be another great choice. I think you could incorporate singing into her combat, and maybe even Webster as a sort of like assist, or maybe he could be like a single attack, like a trap thing that like stalls your opponent or like maybe slows them. And he would also be great to incorporate into her alt. Or you could incorporate her fairy godmother as like her alt. I don't know. I think she just has like a lot of options. I think the Lone Stranger or the Web Slinger, I'm really not sure like if Marvel's decided like a de facto name for him, but I think he'd be a great choice since he's like a different kind of Spider-Man. You could maybe even incorporate his horse Widow, kind of like how Ghost Rider has his bike. You could just, you know, you could make Widow sort of function in similarly. Spider-Man could be cool. Maybe he has moves that allow him to like sink into the floor as like a bunch of spiders and move around and then kind of like pop up from the floor. Sort of like, I think it's Rocket has like a dig ability if I remember right. So that could be cool. And just like that, we only have 2 character slots left. There's still so many great choices, and I feel like I'm forgetting some of like the must-haves. But I guess for, you know, the last 2, maybe Silver Surfer Spidey for the Fantastic Four representation, and lastly, love him or hate him, I think the last slot would have to go to Spider-Boy, just because I don't. It's just I'm hard pressed to think of anybody else that isn't already included to take that slot. Like I said, love him or hate him, Spider-Boy kind of seems to be here to stay. I mean, I like Spider-Boy, but like again, he's very divisive, but I don't see him going anywhere anytime soon. And depending on when this game comes out, yeah, he could be even more popular and make even more sense to include. Regardless, that's my roster of 50 Spider people for a hypothetical Spider-Verse fighting game. I did my best to add as many Spider ladies as I could think of, and I still, again, feel like I missed some, but I guess that just proves my point that there are so many possible choices out there, and if you just kind of sit and think about it, you know, it's fairly easy to think up a roster of 50. I feel like somebody's going to bring up MCU Spidey or Toby or the Insomniac Spider-Man. But the reasons I didn't include them was partially due to like usage rights. more so like in the case of Insomniac Spidey, and because they wouldn't really be interesting in the case of like the movie Spidey. I really tried to focus on Spider people who would be able to have interesting, like different and interesting gimmicks and be able to easily be set apart in the sea of these Spider people. A lot of times, the big criticism of like Marvel inventing these new Spider people is like, oh, well, they no longer feel unique and they no longer stand out. I don't think that's true. And B, I do think this roster kind of illustrates that there are plenty of Spider people who are very different from one another. You just have to, I guess, pay attention. Anyways, that's going to be it from me, guys. This video, oh my god, is definitely long enough. Are there any Spider people I missed that you think should have been included? Is a Spiderverse fighting game something you'd even be interested in? Comment down below and let me know your thoughts. And until next time, true believers, have yourself a cracker of a day.